I think it's important to remember that most American artists go through a long period of not making a living at their art. In my country, we don't support artists in that way. If you want to write music and you want to paint pictures, you want to write poetry, and you complain that you aren't making a living, the typical answer is, who asked you to do it? That's how we do it in the States. So that it's very common to spend 10 or 15 or more years having what we call day jobs, doing anything to support your work until that moment comes when hopefully you can live on the work that you're doing. For me, that happened fairly late. I was 41 before I made a living at my music, though I was doing music from the age of 8, you know. And actually, I did pretty well as long as I was in school. But it was a period between finishing my music training and when I began, which was about the age of 28, and when I actually began making a living. That was a difficult time. At 41, I suddenly realized that I didn't have to drive a cab anymore. And though I renewed my cab license for another 2 years, and finally when I was, I think, 43 or 44, in New York, the renewal comes up every 3 years. And I renewed it one time, and the second time it came up, I let it go. So I kind of felt that I didn't have to do that anymore. Now, in the garage that I worked at, it was filled with artists and writers. If you go to New York, and the chances are that the waiter that waits on you at the restaurant will be an actor or a poet, or it's very, very common. So this is kind of a very typical, let's say, rites of passage of ours. But not only that, but it's not just a rites of passage for many people. That will be how they'll make their living. The people who can make their living actively writing and playing music of the kind that I do, or writing poetry, poets have the hardest time. Dancers have a terrible time. There are a lot of dancers who are who've learned to work, who do computers, who work and they're wonderful artists. But in the States, that's not. We don't support artists. We don't expect them to. We expect them to make their way in somehow until this kind of wonderful day happens when they can make a living. So, but the good thing about it is that you really are a part of the world that your audience is part of. In this work that we're going to hear, or that we're doing now, there is no improvisation. It does come up in my music, but in a limited way. There are parts of Einstein on the Beach that have some improvisation. In fact, an opera I did very recently with Allen Ginsberg called A Hydrogen Jukebox. And I did a setting of his famous poem, Howl. I said two of the 4 sections of Howl. And there's Richard Peck improvises, does a tenor improvisation on it, which is actually wonderful. And Richard's from southwestern Louisiana. He comes from the tradition of Louisiana blues playing, and it's a beautiful solo. But generally speaking, it doesn't really come as a regular part of my music. I am involved with a trilogy of Cocteau pieces, but the impulse really comes from the idea of trying to take film and make it the basis of opera in some way. Now, in the 20th century, opera has always been based on, up until the 20th century, up until now, opera has been based on plays, histories, novels. But in the 20th century, the great literature, the new literature of the 20th century is in film. And it occurred to me, I mean, the obvious question is, could film be part of the tradition of opera? Now, the first opera I did was of Cocteau's work was Orphée, in which I took the scenario and simply made an opera that we staged. And this one, we're taking the actual film itself and making it part of the visual presentation of a dramatic music theater work. There will be a third one based on Les Enfants, which will include the idea of dance. The reason I picked Cocteau, first of all, I have a strong association with the French tradition. Anyway, I finished my studies in Paris with Nathalie Boulanger. I studied with Darius Milhaud. I was in Paris also, and I've been in Paris a lot, and I studied there. But I was looking really for a filmmaker who represented the kind of idealism in film which I want to work in music. And to be truthful, film today really is not a medium where artists can work comfortably. It's basically a medium that's controlled by marketplace. The important news about a film is how much money it makes. That's actually stuff you read in the newspapers in the States, and it's on the news. It's on, people talk about making $41 million in the first weekend. That's the news about film. So film that is directed completely in that way is, in terms of an artistic form, has been so corrupted that it's not even worth really thinking about it in terms of an artistic vision in any way. Cocteau comes from a generation of people where that was still possible. He was a filmmaker, a writer, a dramatist. He was an artist. There was a time when film really, it was welcomed into the family of arts as one of the great new art forms, and we virtually lost it. Virtually, it doesn't exist anymore in that way. But with Cocteau, it does.